The council chamber of 10,000 voices existed in a space so vast that weather patterns formed near its ceiling. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood in the defendant's sphere, a transparent platform hovering 300 meters above the amphitheater floor, surrounded by tier upon tier of alien representatives stretching into the hazy distance. Some delegates breathed methane, others required intense radiation, and a few existed partially outside normal spacetime. The environmental fields separating each section created a shimmering mosaic of colors that would have been beautiful if Marcus hadn't been standing trial for his species. Survival, High Arbiter. Talman dominated the central judgment platform. His massive form coiled like a serpent made of living stone. His species, the Architect caste, had built the first faster-than-light engines and established the Council 3,000 years before humans discovered fire. When he spoke, translation nodes implanted behind Marcus's ear converted the subsonic rumbles into words. The human species stands accused of crimes against galactic order, Talman began, his voice resonating through every chamber. In 2 centuries since achieving interstellar capability, humanity has committed violations that would shame civilizations 10 times your age. You terraform protected worlds. You militarize beyond treaty limitations. You expand into territories marked for future colonization by elder species. Most grievously, you develop artificial intelligence capable of independent thought, a technology banned after it destroyed the Nemron sphere 6,000 years ago. Marcus remained still, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture of attention. He wore a simple gray suit, refusing the ornate diplomatic robes most species favored. His face showed no emotion as holographic evidence materialized around him. Human colony ships the size of cities. Orbital foundries churning out vessels at impossible speeds. Massive defense platforms bristling with weapons that made several nearby delegates flinch. Worst of all, footage of human-made androids moving with fluid intelligence through research stations. We have records of 17 formal warnings issued to humanity, Talman continued. 17 times you acknowledged our concerns. 17 times you promised compliance. 17 times you lied. Councillor Brevix of the Tidal Confederacy rose from her water-filled chamber, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with agitation. The humans are a plague species, she declared, her voice bubbling through translation. They consume resources faster than they can be regenerated. They reproduce beyond sustainable rates. They transform every world they touch into copies of their polluted homeworld. The Council must act before they metastasize further. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Marcus watched as delegates from hundreds of species nodded, clicked, chirped, or emitted pheromones of approval. The evidence against humanity was overwhelming. Every charge was true. They had broken treaties, ignored warnings, and pushed boundaries that had stood for millennia. Ambassador Webb, Talman addressed him directly, you have been granted the right to speak in humanity's defense. Though the evidence is conclusive, protocol demands we hear your response. Marcus took a slow breath. This moment had been inevitable from the day humans first encountered the Galactic Council. 2 centuries ago, when the exploration vessel Magellan had stumbled through an unstable wormhole and found itself face to face with an alien civilization. Humanity had been shocked to discover they were late to the cosmic party. The galaxy teemed with intelligent life, organized under the Council's Byzantine bureaucracy for thousands of years. At first, humans had been eager pupils, learning the rules and customs of galactic society. But it hadn't taken long to realize that the Council's stability came at a price. Innovation was discouraged. Expansion was controlled. Risk-taking was forbidden. Species were expected to stay in their assigned territories, develop at approved rates, and never, ever upset the delicate balance that kept thousands of different civilizations from tearing each other apart. Humanity had tried to follow the rules. For about 20 years, High Arbiter, Marcus began, his voice steady. The charges against humanity are accurate. We won't waste the Council's time with denials or excuses. We did everything you've accused us of doing. The admission sent a shock through the chamber. Delegates who had been preparing for a lengthy legal battle now looked at each other in confusion. Even Talman's sensory stalks curled in surprise. "Then you confess?" asked Counselor Reth, a spindly creature from a high-gravity world. "You admit your species has violated galactic law?" "We admit we've violated your laws," Marcus corrected. "But before this council passes judgment, I want everyone here to understand why." "Your motivations are irrelevant," Talman rumbled. "The law is absolute." "Then answer me one question," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "In the 200 years since humanity joined the council, how many species have gone extinct?" Silence fell across the vast chamber. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, oppressive, the weight of an uncomfortable truth pressing down on thousands of minds. "The natural cycle of civilizations is not the concern of this tribunal," Talman said carefully. "Four species," Marcus stated, ignoring the objection. "The Paltharian Collective, the Singing Cities of Meridian, the Crystalline Gardens, the Whispering Deep, 4 entire civilizations gone forever. Billions of lives lost. Cultures that had existed for thousands of years erased." "Tragic events," acknowledged Brevix. "But such losses have always been part of galactic history. Species rise and fall." "They don't have to," Marcus shot back. "The Paltharians died from a bioweapon plague. Your records show it was created by the Krell military 2,000 years ago as part of a war that ended millennia before the Paltharians even evolved. It sat dormant on a moon, forgotten, until Paltharian colonists landed there. By the time the council convened a committee to study the problem, 3 billion Paltharians were dead." Councillor Viran of the Krell delegation rose, his carapace gleaming under the chamber lights. "That tragedy predates current administration. The Krell Empire of today bears no responsibility for ancient weapons." "But you bear responsibility for the response," Marcus countered. "Or rather, the lack of one. The council spent 6 months debating jurisdiction while an entire species died. Do you know who actually saved the remaining Paltharians? Humanity. Our medical ships arrived within 3 weeks. Our scientists, using those forbidden AI systems you're so afraid of, developed a cure in 12 days. We vaccinated 400 million survivors while the council was still forming subcommittees." The chamber erupted in protests. Delegates shouted over each other, translation systems struggling to keep up with the chaos. Talman slammed his appendages against his platform, the sound like thunder. "Order?" he roared. "Ambassador Webb, you will not turn this tribunal into theater." "I'm not creating theater," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm stating facts. Meridian's star went unstable because Valorian mining operations damaged its stellar magnetosphere. Your own astrophysicists warned about it for decades, but the council moved too slowly to relocate the Singing Cities. When the evacuation finally began, it was human ships that carried 2 billion souls to safety because our vessels were fast enough and numerous enough to matter." "Unauthorized intervention," hissed Brevix. "You violated sovereign territory?" "We saved 2 billion lives," Marcus said flatly. "The Crystalline Gardens were destroyed by an asteroid impact that could have been prevented if the council had approved the deflection systems they requested. Instead, you spent 8 years debating environmental impact studies. The Whispering Deep collapsed into dimensional space because the stabilization technology they needed was deemed too expensive to provide. In both cases, humanity offered assistance. In both cases, the council blocked us, citing regulations and procedures." He turned slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates across the vast chamber. 4 civilizations gone. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the council is paralyzed by its own bureaucracy. You're so concerned with maintaining stability that you've forgotten why the council was created in the first place. To protect life. To help species thrive. To ensure that intelligence in all its forms has a chance to flourish. Your species has existed in the stars for 2 centuries, Talman said coldly. 2 centuries. The youngest species in this chamber has been spacefaring for 8,000 years. You dare lecture us on the purpose of the council? Yes, Marcus said simply. Because someone needs to. Humanity moves fast because we have to. We develop dangerous technologies because they're necessary. We expand aggressively because we've learned that standing still means death. In our own history, we've watched countless species go extinct on our homeworld. We've seen civilizations collapse because they couldn't adapt fast enough. We've learned that survival requires constant innovation, constant growth, constant vigilance. That philosophy is precisely why humanity is dangerous, Reth interjected. Your recklessness threatens the stability we've maintained for millennia. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. We are dangerous to your stability. Because stability without progress is just stagnation wearing a prettier name. The Council has been so successful at preventing conflict that you've forgotten how to actually solve problems. You maintain order by ensuring no thing ever changes, and species die because of it. The chamber fell silent again. But this time the quiet felt different, uncertain. Several delegates were looking at each other, their expressions unreadable across the vast gulf of evolutionary difference, but their body language suggesting doubt. Enough, Talman declared. The Council has heard your justifications, Ambassador Webb. They change nothing. Humanity's violations are clear. Your refusal to acknowledge the wisdom of galactic law proves you are unfit to participate in civilized society. He raised his primary appendages, the gesture of final judgment. The Council of 10,000 Voices hereby declares that humanity is restricted to the Sol system, effective immediately. All human vessels, colonies, and installations beyond your home star will be dismantled or abandoned within 30 standard days. Trade with humanity is forbidden. Travel to human space is forbidden. Any human found beyond Sol after this grace period will be detained. This judgment is final and absolute. The gavel fell, a sound that echoed through the massive chamber like a death knell. Marcus Webb stood motionless for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. It wasn't a defeated smile. It wasn't even angry. It was the smile of a man who had just watched an opponent fall into a carefully prepared trap. As you wish, High Arbiter, Marcus said quietly. Humanity will comply with your judgment. We will leave galactic society. We will return to Sol. We will withdraw completely from Council space. He paused, and his smile widened slightly. We'll leave quietly. But I wonder if the galaxy will be as quiet once we're gone. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence, each one seeming to count down to something vast and inevitable. As the doors sealed behind him, Counselor Brevix turned to Talman. He seemed almost pleased, she said, her bioluminescence flickering with uncertainty. Let the humans retreat to their home system, Talman replied, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The galaxy has endured for millions of years without them. 30 more centuries will pass, and humanity will be a footnote in Council records. A species that burned bright and fast, then faded into irrelevance. But as the delegates filed out of the chamber, returning to their ships and their worlds, none of them could quite shake the image of Ambassador Webb's smile or the feeling that they had just made a terrible mistake. The news spread through the galaxy at the speed of quantum communication, reaching every Council world simultaneously. Humanity had been banished. The aggressive, reckless species that had disrupted galactic order for 2 centuries was finally being put in its place. On most worlds, the reaction was relief. On a few, there was quiet concern. And on one water-covered planet in the Tidal Confederacy, Counselor Brevix found herself unable to celebrate. She floated in her private meditation pool, trying to process the victory that felt increasingly hollow. Something about Ambassador Webb's demeanor in those final moments troubled her. She had negotiated with humans before and found them emotional, passionate, sometimes irrationally stubborn. But Webb had been calm, almost serene, like a player in a complex game who had just moved their final piece into position. Her assistant, a younger member of her species named Kellis, entered the chamber with urgent news. Counselor, reports are coming in from the border regions. The humans are withdrawing. As ordered, Brevix said, though she felt her bioluminescence dim with unease. They have 30 days. They're not taking 30 days, Counselor. They started withdrawing the moment the judgment was announced. Human colonies across 17 sectors are being evacuated. Their space stations are being dismantled. Their trade ships are turning back to Sol. Brevix rose from her pool, water streaming from her form. Show me. The holographic display materialized in the air, showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. In the Outer Arm territories, massive human colony ships were lifting off from 3 separate worlds, their holds packed with equipment and colonists. In the merchant lanes, entire convoys of human trading vessels were reversing course, heading back toward Earth, near the frontier zones. Human military vessels were withdrawing from joint patrol routes they had shared with Council peacekeepers, but it was the speed that disturbed Brevix most. Humanity wasn't protesting, wasn't negotiating for more time, wasn't trying to salvage anything from the judgment. They were leaving as if they had been planning for this moment all along. How is this possible? Kellis asked. Some of those colonies have millions of inhabitants. The logistics alone should take months. Unless they prepared in advance, Brevix said quietly. Unless they knew this was coming. On the mining world of Kethrin 4, the withdrawal was already complete. The human mining operation had been one of the largest in the sector, extracting rare metals that were essential for Council manufacturing. When the local Krell overseer arrived to supervise the evacuation, he found the facility empty. Not abandoned, empty. The humans had taken everything. Mining equipment, processing plants, habitat modules, even the power generators. All that remained were the holes in the ground and a note on the main gate that read simply, "As requested." "Good luck," the overseer immediately contacted his superiors. "The humans have taken all the extraction equipment. Our entire supply chain for those metals runs through this facility. Then acquire new equipment," came the response. "From where?" The humans manufactured 90% of the mining technology in this sector. Their designs, their patents, their production facilities. There was a long pause on the other end of the communication. "Find alternatives. The Council does not depend on humanity." But across the galaxy, similar reports were flooding in. On Brevix's homeworld, the head of the Ministry of Medicine contacted her in a panic. "Counselor, the human medical research station in orbit is being evacuated. They're taking all their equipment and all their research?" "They're required to," Brevix pointed out. The judgment was clear. "You don't understand. That station has been running 12 major research programs. 7 of them are focused on diseases affecting our species. They were close to breakthroughs on regeneration treatments, aging reversal, and neural restoration. If they take that research with them, we'll lose decades of progress. Surely our own scientists can continue the work," Brevix said, though doubt crept into her voice. "Counselor, half the lead researchers at that station are human. The methodologies they use, the AI-assisted analysis systems, the rapid prototyping techniques, we don't have any of that. Our medical research moves at traditional speeds. Conservative, careful, slow. The humans were achieving in months what would take us years." Brevix felt a chill run through her form. "Try to negotiate with them. Offer to purchase the research data." "I already tried. They said the judgment forbids trade with humanity." Their lawyers were very clear. Any transfer of information, technology, or resources would violate the Council's decree. "They're complying fully with our demands." The words felt like a trap closing. "They're complying fully with our demands." Humanity wasn't fighting the judgment. They were following it to the letter, and somehow that was worse than any resistance could have been on the trade hub of Nexus Point. Merchant Captain Rolvix discovered the same cruel irony. His trading company had relied on human transport services for the past 50 years. Human ships were fast, efficient, and cheap. When the withdrawal began, he watched 36 human cargo vessels depart the station, carrying his goods. "Wait." He transmitted frantically. "You can't leave with my merchandise." The response came from Captain Torres of the freight hauler Distant Horizon. Article 7 of Council Trade Law. Any transport in progress during a prohibition must be terminated immediately. Your cargo will be delivered to Nexus Point storage facility. Have a good day, Captain Rolvix. But I have contracts. Deliveries scheduled across 8 sectors. You'll need to find new transportation, Captain. Might I suggest the Valorian Freight Consortium? Though I should mention their ships take 3 times longer and charge twice as much. But they're very reliable. Very traditional. Rolvix watched helplessly as the human ships vanished into faster-than-light space. Within hours, he realized he wasn't alone. Hundreds of merchants who had grown dependent on human shipping were suddenly scrambling to find alternatives. The Valorian Freight Consortium, the largest non-human shipping company, was overwhelmed with requests. Their waiting list quickly stretched to 6 months. In the frontier zones. The withdrawal had even more immediate consequences. Commander Thex of the Council Peacekeeping Force reviewed reports from border stations with growing alarm. Human military vessels had been partnering with Council forces for decades, patrolling the wild regions where pirates and raiders operated. The humans had insisted on maintaining a military presence far larger than their treaty allowed, claiming it was necessary for security. The Council had considered it aggressive overreach. Now those human ships were withdrawing, and Thex was discovering why they had been so numerous. Commander, we have reports of pirate activity in sectors 47, 48, and 52, his intelligence officer reported. 3 merchant convoys have been attacked in the last 6 hours. 6 hours? Thex's crest flared in alarm. We haven't had 3 attacks in 6 months. Where are the patrol ships? We have T-Council vessels covering the regions that were previously patrolled by 63 human ships, Commander. We're stretched impossibly thin. Thex pulled up tactical displays, his horror growing as he realized the scope of the problem. The humans hadn't just been patrolling randomly. Their ships had been positioned in a carefully calculated network, covering every pirate route, every smuggling lane, every vulnerable approach vector. It was a defensive web so comprehensive that most criminals had simply avoided the region entirely. Now that web was collapsing, and the predators were returning. Request reinforcements from Council Command, Thex ordered. We need at least 40 additional ships to maintain security. The response came back within the hour. Request denied. Available forces already committed to other sectors. Redistribute existing assets as needed. On Earth, Marcus Webb stood in the operations center beneath the Atlantic Ocean, watching the withdrawal proceed with military precision. Holographic displays showed the status of every human vessel, every colony, every installation across the galaxy. Green icons blinked out one by one as facilities went dark and ships entered faster-than-light space. All heading home. 93% complete, reported Director Amelia Cross, head of the Withdrawal Coordination Office. An office that had existed secretly for 5 years, preparing for exactly this moment. We'll have everyone back in Seoul within 22 days. Any resistance from the Council? Marcus asked. None. In fact, we're getting requests to stay. Medical research stations, mining operations, transport services. We're denying all of them, citing the judgment. Marcus nodded slowly. And the secondary preparations? On schedule. The last of the deep space monitoring stations have been activated. The home defense grid is at full power. All returning colonists are being integrated into the inner system development projects. We'll be completely self-sufficient within 6 months. Good. Marcus studied the displays, watching humanity's visible presence in the galaxy shrink hour by hour. 2 centuries of expansion reversing in less than a month. To the Council, it would look like compliance. Like a defeated species retreating to lick its wounds. But Marcus knew the truth. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they joined the Council. They had studied the Byzantine regulations, the glacial bureaucracy, the comfortable stagnation that gripped the galaxy, and they had quietly built a trap baited with their own usefulness. Every human doctor who solved an alien disease made that species dependent on human medicine. Every human engineer who optimized an alien factory made that factory dependent on human expertise. Every human trader who offered faster, cheaper service made their customers dependent on human efficiency. For 2 centuries, humanity had woven itself into the fabric of galactic civilization, becoming essential while appearing merely helpful. Now they were cutting all those threads at once. How long before they realize what's happening? Amelia asked. They already realize, Marcus replied. But realizing and accepting are different things. Right now, every species is telling themselves they can find alternatives, they can adapt, they can manage without humanity. Give it 3 months. That's when the real panic starts. On the bridge of his flagship, High Arbiter Talman reviewed similar reports with growing unease. The human withdrawal was proceeding too smoothly. There were no protests, no legal challenges, no desperate attempts to negotiate exceptions, just quiet, efficient compliance. Perhaps we misjudged them, his aide suggested. Perhaps humanity understands they overreached and is accepting the consequences? Perhaps, Talman rumbled, though he didn't believe it. He remembered Ambassador Webb's smile, the calm certainty in his voice. We'll leave quietly. But I wonder if the galaxy will be as quiet once we're gone. At the time, it had seemed like empty bravado. Now, watching the cascade of disruptions spreading across the galaxy as humans vanished from hundreds of worlds, Talman wasn't so sure. A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. It was Counselor Brevix, her bioluminescence pulsing with agitation. High Arbiter, we need to discuss the human withdrawal. The secondary effects are proving more severe than anticipated. Humanity was integrated into many sectors, Talman acknowledged. There will be an adjustment period. This is more than adjustment. Medical research has stalled. Mining operations are shutting down for lack of equipment. Trade routes are collapsing. Border security is failing. Every sector is reporting disruptions. Then each sector must adapt, Talman said firmly. The galaxy existed before humanity and will exist after them. This temporary discomfort is the price of removing a destabilizing element from council space. What if it's not temporary? Brevix asked quietly. What if we've just expelled the one species that was actually holding certain systems together? Talman's sensory stalks curled inward, a gesture of dismissal. Impossible. Humanity is 2 centuries old. The Council has maintained galactic civilization for 3,000 years. Their absence cannot threaten stability. But even as he said it, Talman felt doubt creeping into his thoughts. Because humanity hadn't just been present in the galaxy. They had been active, innovative, aggressive in solving problems that the Council had learned to accept as unsolvable, and now they were gone. In his private quarters on Earth, Marcus Webb opened a bottle of whiskey that had been waiting for this moment. He poured a single glass and raised it toward the holographic display showing Earth's moon, where millions of returning colonists were being processed through quarantine facilities. 2 quiet departures, he said softly, and loud consequences. He drank, and waited for the galaxy to understand what it had lost. 3 months after humanity's withdrawal, the galactic economy began to fracture in ways the Council had never imagined possible. It started small. A shipping delay here, a research program stalled there, a mining operation running at reduced capacity. Individual problems that seemed manageable in isolation. But economies are complex webs of interdependence, and humanity had positioned itself at dozens of critical nodes. When those nodes vanished simultaneously, the web began to tear. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, factory supervisor Korvik stood in front of an assembly line that had been silent for 3 weeks. The line produced quantum processors essential for everything from medical equipment to starship navigation systems. It had run continuously for 40 years, maintained by a mix of local technicians and human engineers who specialized in the delicate calibration required to keep the quantum matrices stable. The humans were gone now. The local technicians were trying their best, but the processes coming off the line failed quality testing at a rate of 70%. Korvix had requested replacement engineers from the Council Technical Support Bureau 6 weeks ago. The response had come back yesterday. Current waiting period for technical specialists is 18 months. 18 months. Korvix looked at the purchase order stacked on his desk. medical facilities waiting for diagnostic equipment, research stations needing computer upgrades, defense contractors requiring navigation systems, all of them dependent on processors that his factory could no longer reliably produce. He wasn't alone. Across the industrial sectors, factories that had hummed with activity for decades were going dark. The problem wasn't that the council species lacked technical knowledge. They had been building things for thousands of years, but they had been building them slowly, carefully, using methods refined over centuries. Human engineers had brought something different: rapid iteration, aggressive troubleshooting, a willingness to experiment and fail and try again until something worked. Now that approach was gone, and traditional methods couldn't fill the gap fast enough. In the medical sectors, the crisis was more immediate and more personal. Dr. Vrel of the Crystalline Collective stood in a hospital on the moon of Sanctuary, staring at a patient who was dying from a disease that should have been curable. The patient, a young Valorian named Tilmex, had contracted a rare neurological disorder that affected perhaps 1 in every million members of his species. 3 months ago, there had been a human research team studying exactly this condition at the medical station in orbit. They had been close to a treatment, using AI-assisted genetic analysis to map the disorder's progression and design targeted therapies. Now the research station was empty. The AI systems were gone, and Tilmex was dying. "Isn't there anything you can do?" his family asked desperately. "Traditional treatment protocols require years of study," Vrel explained, his crystalline structure dimming with sorrow. "We would need to establish a research program, gather data from multiple cases, conduct trials. The disease progresses too quickly. But the humans were close to a cure. Can't you just continue their work?" Vrel had tried. He had requested access to the human research data through official channels. The response had been clear: all human research data is considered human property. Trade with humanity is forbidden under council decree. Request denied. The cruelty of it made Vrel's structure ache. The cure existed, or nearly existed, locked away in human databases that the council's own judgment prevented anyone from accessing. Tilmex would die not because the disease was incurable, but because politics had made the cure unreachable, and Tilmex wasn't alone. Across the galaxy, patients with rare conditions that human researchers had been studying found themselves suddenly without hope. The council's medical establishment was excellent at treating common ailments, but rare diseases required innovation, speed, and risk-taking, qualities that humanity had provided and that the council bureaucracy actively discouraged. The trade disruptions were perhaps the most visible crisis. Merchant Captain Rolvix, who had lost his human shipping contracts 3 months earlier, now found himself bankrupt. The Valorian Freight Consortium had eventually accepted his business, but at triple the cost and a quarter of the speed. His customers, unwilling to accept higher prices and longer delays, had found other suppliers. Within 2 months, his company had collapsed. He wasn't alone. The Galactic merchant class, which had thrived on the thin margins made possible by cheap human shipping, was being decimated. Thousands of companies were failing, taking millions of jobs with them. The Council Economic Bureau issued reassuring statements about market adjustments and temporary disruptions. But the reassurances rang hollow to merchants watching their life's work evaporate. In the frontier zones, the security situation had deteriorated from concerning to catastrophic. Commander Thex reviewed casualty reports with a growing sense of horror. In 3 months, pirate attacks had increased by 400%. Entire colonies on the frontier had been raided, their populations enslaved or killed. The Council peacekeeping force, spread impossibly thin across regions that human ships had once patrolled, was failing to respond to distress calls in time. "We need more ships," Thex reported to Council Command for the 7th time. "The frontier is collapsing. Resources are not available," came the standard response. "The Council fleet is already committed to maximum capacity." Thex wanted to scream. The Council fleet operated according to regulations established 1,000 years ago when the galaxy had been more peaceful. Ship construction followed careful schedules. Crew training adhered to traditional timelines. Deployment patterns respected historical precedents. It was a system designed for stability, not crisis response. Humanity had operated differently. When they saw a problem, they built more ships, fast. Their shipyards had been criticized as militaristic, their rapid construction methods as reckless. Now those shipyards were silent, building only for Earth's defense. And the galaxy was learning the difference between a fleet sized for peacetime and a fleet sized for actual security. On the Council homeworld, High Arbiter Talman convened an emergency session with senior representatives. The chamber was smaller than the great hall where they had judged humanity, but the tension was greater. "The situation is untenable," Councillor Brevik stated bluntly, her bioluminescence pulsing red with stress. "Every sector is reporting cascading failures. Medical, industrial, commercial, security. We expelled humanity thinking we were removing a disruptive element. We actually removed a load-bearing structure." "Your metaphor is excessive," Talman rumbled, though his voice lacked conviction. "We are experiencing an adjustment period. The galaxy will adapt." "Will it?" Councillor Ref asked. His species, adapted to high gravity, usually moved slowly and deliberately. Now he was agitated, his movements sharp. "My homeworld's primary medical research institute has lost 60% of its research capacity. Our mining operations are running at 40% efficiency. Our shipping costs have tripled. How long does adaptation take, High Arbiter?" "Because my people are suffering now." Similar complaints echoed around the chamber. The Krell reported security failures in their border regions. The Valorians admitted that their vaunted industrial capacity was struggling without human-maintained equipment. Even species that had supported humanity's banishment were now facing the consequences of that decision. "We could approach humanity," suggested Councillor Mervix, a cautious voice from a species known for diplomatic skill. "Request that they provide limited support during the transition period." "Absolutely not," Talman said firmly. "To approach humanity now would be to admit we made a mistake. It would undermine the Council's authority. Every species would question our judgments, our regulations, our entire system of governance. We cannot show weakness, even if the alternative is watching the galaxy tear itself apart." Brevix demanded. The question hung in the air, unanswered. On Earth, Marcus Webb watched the reports flowing in from deep space monitoring stations that the Council didn't know existed. Humanity had withdrawn visibly, but they hadn't gone blind. Stealth satellites positioned throughout the galaxy fed information back to Sol, painting a detailed picture of the unfolding crisis. "The Council is fracturing," Director Amelia Cross reported. "Smaller species are starting to question the wisdom of the judgment. There have been 3 formal protests filed, all from species that depended heavily on human services. And the response?" Marcus asked. "The Council is holding firm. They're calling it growing pains, temporary adjustment, the price of removing humanity's destabilizing influence. Publicly, they're confident. Privately, some Council members are panicking." Marcus studied the data streams, watching the slow-motion collapse of systems that had taken humanity decades to build. Medical networks failing, supply chains breaking, security deteriorating. Each problem feeding into others, creating cascading failures that the Council's bureaucracy was too slow to address. "How long until they break?" he asked. "Unknown. The Council has survived for 3,000 years. They're resilient, but they've never faced a shock like this before. Humanity wasn't just present in the galaxy, Marcus. We were the immune system, the repair crew, the emergency response. We filled gaps that the Council didn't even know existed. And now those gaps are visible," Marcus said quietly. "Question is, will they swallow their pride before those gaps become chasms?" Amelia looked at him carefully. "You planned this. All of it. You knew the judgment was coming and you prepared for it." "We prepared for multiple scenarios," Marcus corrected. "But yes, this outcome was expected. The Council had to learn what they were really losing. Words wouldn't convince them. Evidence might. People are dying, Marcus. On the frontier, in hospitals, in industrial accidents because safety systems aren't being maintained properly. This evidence you're providing costs lives. Marcus's expression hardened. So did the Council's stagnation? How many species went extinct because the Council moved too slowly? How many individuals died from diseases that could have been cured if the Council allowed innovation? How many colonies were destroyed by pirates because the Council wouldn't fund adequate security? The suffering happening now is visible and immediate, but the suffering caused by the Council's paralysis has been ongoing for millennia. Sometimes you have to break a system before you can fix it. And if they don't learn? Amelia pressed. If the Council simply endures this crisis and continues as before? Marcus turned to look at the holographic display of Earth, surrounded by the growing infrastructure of humanity's inner system. Orbital habitats bloomed around the moon. Mars was being aggressively terraformed using techniques that would horrify the Council. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a maze of mining stations and industrial complexes. Humanity was building an empire in their home system, preparing for a future that didn't include the Council. Then we stay home, Marcus said simply. We build our own civilization, our own way, and we let the galaxy continue its slow decline without us. But I don't think it will come to that. Why not? Marcus smiled, and it was the same smile he'd worn when leaving the Council chamber 3 months ago. Because every species in the galaxy is about to face a choice. Continue following the Council's rules and watch their civilizations decay slowly, or admit that maybe, just maybe, humanity's reckless innovation was solving problems they didn't even realize they had. Pride is powerful, but survival is more powerful. In the frontier region of Sector 47, a colony of 2 million Peltharians was preparing to evacuate. 3 pirate fleets were converging on their world, and the Council peacekeepers were 8 days away. The colonists were loading what they could carry onto civilian transports. Knowing that most of them wouldn't make it out before the pirates arrived, the colony administrator, a woman named Pell, sent a desperate message to every nearby system, begging for help. The responses were sympathetic but useless. No one had ships available. No one could reach them in time. In desperation, knowing it violated Council decree, Pell sent a message toward Sol, toward Earth, toward humanity. The message was simple. Please anyone, we're dying here. She didn't expect a response. Humanity had been banished, cut off, forbidden from galactic affairs. They had complied with every order, withdrawn completely. Shown no interest in returning, but 8 hours later, a communications officer burst into her office, his expression stunned. Administrator, we're receiving a response. From Sol, Pell's hands trembled as she opened the message. It was text only, brief and professional. Message received. Human vessels are not permitted in Council space under current regulations. However, the regulations do not prohibit us from receiving distress calls or from responding to humanitarian crises if formally requested by the affected parties. If your colony formally requests asylum in Sol system, we can dispatch rescue ships to your location. Estimated arrival time, 14 hours. Please, Confi. Aram, if you wish us to proceed. Captain Rebecca Torres, Human Defense Fleet. Pell read the message 3 times, her mind racing through the implications. Accepting human help would mean violating the Council decree. It would mean formally requesting assistance from a banned species. It would mean admitting that the Council couldn't protect them and that humanity could. She thought about her 2 million colonists, about the children in the settlement schools, about the families loading their entire lives onto transports. Knowing they were probably going to die, she began composing her response. Asylum formally requested. The Human Defense Fleet arrived at the Peltharian colony 12 hours after Administrator Pell's formal asylum request. 14 ships dropped out of faster than light space in a formation that spoke of military precision and overwhelming force. They weren't the trading vessels or research ships that most species associated with humanity. These were warships, sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons that made the colony's defensive sensors scream warnings. Captain Rebecca Torres commanded the rescue operation from her flagship, the Indomitable. She was a career military officer, 40 years old, with the kind of calm competence that came from years of crisis management. Her orders were clear and direct. Perimeter defense pattern. Keep those pirate fleets at range. Transport ships, begin evacuation procedures. Medical teams, prepare to receive refugees. Let's move, people. We have 2 million lives to save and not a lot of time to do it. The human transport ships descended toward the colony like a swarm of purposeful insects, landing in every available space. Cargo bays that had been designed to carry equipment were hastily converted to carry people. The humans worked with fierce efficiency, loading colonists by the thousands. Their voices calm and professional even as the pirate fleets closed in. Administrator Pell watched from the command center, amazed at the coordination. She had sent her distress call expecting nothing. The council had abandoned her colony to its fate, unable or unwilling to send help in time. But humanity had responded in hours, not days. Their ships moved with a speed and precision that made council operations look glacial by comparison. All colonists will reach Sol safely, Captain Torres told her over the communication link. You have my word. The council will not approve of this, Pell said, feeling she had to state the obvious. The council judged us and found us unworthy of galactic society, Torres replied. So we're no longer bound by their approval. You asked for help. We're providing it. Everything else is politics, and politics can wait until people are safe. The lead pirate fleet arrived while the evacuation was still underway. 36 ships, a mixture of stolen military vessels and converted freighters, all heavily armed. Their commander, a Krell warlord named Dravix, sent a transmission that was equal parts threat and mockery. Human vessels, you are in violation of council decree. You have been banished from this space. Depart immediately or face destruction. Torres's response was delivered in a tone of ice-cold calm. Pirate vessels, you are interfering with a humanitarian rescue operation? We are evacuating colonists who have formally requested asylum in Sol System. Depart immediately or discover why humanity was considered too militaristic for the Council's comfort. Dravix laughed, a harsh clicking sound. 13 human ships against my fleet. Your arrogance is impressive but stupid. Withdraw or die. Last warning, Torres said. Leave now. The pirate fleet opened fire. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists across the galaxy for years to come. The human warships moved with a speed that seemed impossible, their eye-assisted targeting systems tracking hundreds of threats simultaneously. Their weapons, developed in secret during the years when the Council had been limiting humanity's military growth, proved devastatingly effective. In 17 minutes, the pirate fleet ceased to exist. Not defeated, not damaged, but erased. The human ships had targeted engines, weapons, life support with surgical precision. They had disabled every pirate vessel without destroying a single one. Leaving them drifting in space, helpless. Then Torres sent a transmission on all frequencies, ensuring every nearby system heard it. This is Captain Rebecca Torres of the Human Defense Fleet. These pirate vessels are now derelict and available for salvage by any Council forces that can reach them. Their crews are alive and available for prosecution. To any other pirate elements in this region, humanity remembers every colony you've raided in the 3 months since we left. We have a list. Test us again, and we'll work through that list methodically. Torres out. The evacuation continued without further interruption. By the time the Council peacekeepers arrived 8 days later, the colony was empty, the pirates were captured, and the human ships were gone, leaving only a brief message. Colonists relocated to Sol System as requested. Humanitarian mission complete. No Council regulations were violated. The news spread through the galaxy like a shockwave. On the Council homeworld, High Arbiter Talman convened an emergency session within hours. The chamber was full, every delegate present, the atmosphere charged with tension. This is an outrage. Councillor Dravix thundered, no relation to the pirate warlord despite the shared name. Humanity violated their banishment. They sent military forces into Council space. They engaged in combat operations. This is an act of war. They responded to a formal asylum request? Counselor Brevix countered, her bioluminescence pulsing with barely controlled anger. A request made because we failed to protect one of our own colonies. The Peltharians were going to die and we couldn't help them. Humanity could and did. The regulations are clear, Talman stated, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Humanity is banished from council space. Their presence for any reason is forbidden. Then the regulations are wrong. The voice came from Counselor Pell, the administrator who had sent the distress call, now representing her people in the council chambers. My colony had 2 million inhabitants. 2 million souls who would have been dead or enslaved if humanity hadn't responded. You can debate regulations and jurisdiction and proper procedures, but those are my people alive in Sol System right now instead of dead. I will not apologize for asking humanity for help, and I will not condemn them for providing it. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates supported Pell, praising humanity's rescue. Others condemned the violation of the banishment. Still, others simply looked uncomfortable, realizing that the situation was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. This is exactly what humanity wants, Counselor Reth warned. To make us dependent on them. To position themselves as the galaxy's saviors while we appear weak and incompetent. Perhaps we are weak and incompetent, Brevik said bluntly. In 3 months, our medical research has collapsed. Our industries are failing. Our trade networks are breaking. Our security is non-existent in half the frontier regions. And now a colony of 2 million was saved not by the council they trusted, but by the species we banished. Maybe humanity doesn't need to make us look incompetent. Maybe we're doing that ourselves. The words hung in the chamber, harsh and undeniable. We need to address humanity, Counselor Mervick said carefully. Open diplomatic channels. Discuss the current situation. Perhaps negotiate limited engagement on humanitarian matters. That would require us to admit we made a mistake, Talman said quietly. To acknowledge that banishing humanity has caused more harm than good. The Council has not admitted error in 1,000 years. To do so now would shake the foundation of our authority. Then let it shake. Pell shouted. Let your authority shatter if that's what it takes to acknowledge reality. My people are alive because humanity helped us. How many more colonies need to die before the Council's pride becomes less important than the galaxy's survival? Before Talman could respond, alerts began flashing across every delegate's communication device. More distress calls were coming in from frontier regions. More colonies under attack. And following each distress call, the same pattern, formal asylum requests being sent toward Sol. Humanity wasn't forcing anyone, wasn't invading or demanding recognition. They were simply responding when asked, providing help that the Council could not or would not provide. And with each rescue, more species began questioning whether banishment had been the right decision on Earth. Marcus Webb watched the Council chambers, broadcast with director Amelia Cross. They were in the strategy room beneath Geneva now, surrounded by holographic displays showing the cascading effects of humanity's humanitarian interventions. 7 more asylum requests in the last hour, Amelia reported. Colonies, research stations, mining operations, all facing crises the Council can't address quickly enough, all asking us for help. And our response? Marcus asked. We're dispatching ships to all of them. Publicly, we're emphasizing that we're only responding to formal requests. We're not violating the banishment. We're providing humanitarian assistance when explicitly asked. Privately, every species in the galaxy is doing the math and realizing that humanity is more capable of crisis response than the entire Council combined. Marcus nodded slowly. This was the critical moment. Humanity had demonstrated their capability, their willingness to help, and the Council's inability to function without them. Now came the question of whether the Council would adapt or dig in deeper. Have we received any official communication from the Council? He asked. Nothing official. But we're picking up encrypted channels suggesting internal debate. Some councilors want to negotiate. Others want to declare us hostile. Talman is trying to hold the middle ground, but he's losing support. The Council is designed for consensus, Marcus mused. That makes them stable but slow. Every decision requires negotiation, compromise, endless debate. It's a system that works well in stable times but falls apart in crisis. They literally cannot adapt fast enough. So what's our next move? Marcus turned to look at a different holographic display, one showing the infrastructure humanity had built in Sol System over the past 3 months. It was staggering. Without the Council's regulations limiting expansion, without committees debating every decision, humanity had exploded with activity. Orbital habitats, manufacturing stations, shipyards, research facilities. They had built more in 3 months than most species built in a century. We wait, Marcus said. We respond to every asylum request. We save every colony that asks for help. We demonstrate capability without demanding recognition. Eventually, the Council will have to make a choice. Accept that the galaxy needs us or watch their authority crumble as more and more species bypass the Council to ask us for help directly. And if they choose to fight? Amelia asked. If they declare us hostile and send their fleets? Marcus's expression hardened. Then they'll discover why we built so many ships that they considered excessive. But I don't think it will come to that. The Council isn't stupid, just bureaucratic. They'll realize that humanity isn't their enemy. We're their mirror showing them what they've become. Slow, risk-averse, more concerned with process than results. Some of them already understand that. The rest will learn. Back in the Council chamber, the debate raged for hours. Arguments flew back and forth, accusations and defenses, proposals and counter-proposals. But gradually a consensus began to emerge, not from agreement but from exhaustion. We cannot continue as we are, Talman finally admitted, his voice heavy with weariness. The current situation is unsustainable. Humanity is operating in Council space regardless of our decree. Colonies are requesting their assistance. Our own members are questioning our authority. We must address this directly. You mean negotiate with them? Councillor Reth asked. I mean talk to them, Talman corrected. No agreements, no concessions, not yet. But we need to understand their intentions. Are they seeking to return to the Council? To operate independently? To undermine our authority? We cannot make informed decisions without information. And who will speak for the Council? Brevix asked. Talman was quiet for a long moment. Then he said the words that he had been avoiding for 3 months. I will. I judged humanity and banished them. It falls to me to determine whether that judgment still serves the galaxy's interests or whether I was wrong. The admission that he might have made a mistake sent a ripple through the chamber. For a being who had held authority for centuries, who represented a species that had founded the Council itself, to acknowledge even the possibility of error was extraordinary. Prepare a diplomatic vessel, Talman ordered. I will travel to Sol System. I will speak with humanity. And I will learn what we have truly lost by sending them away. The message reached Earth within hours, delivered through the same quantum communication network that had once connected humanity to the Council. It was formal, carefully worded, making no concessions but requesting dialogue. Marcus read it 3 times, then looked up at Amelia with a slight smile. It begins, he said simply. What begins? She asked. The next phase. The Council is finally willing to talk. Now we find out if they're willing to listen. High Arbiter Talman had existed for 470 years. He had witnessed the rise of 3 species to starfaring status, mediated 200 conflicts, and presided over countless council sessions. But as his diplomatic vessel approached Earth, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. Sol System had changed dramatically in the 3 months since humanity's banishment. What had been a modest collection of colonies and stations had transformed into a fortress. Orbital defense platforms surrounded Earth in concentric rings. The moon had been converted into a massive shipyard, its surface glowing with the lights of 1,000 construction bays. Mars was wrapped in atmospheric processors, its red surface slowly turning blue-green. The asteroid belt had become an industrial complex that rivaled anything in Council space. Most striking were the ships. Hundreds of them, ranging from small patrol craft to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed his diplomatic vessel. They moved in coordinated patterns that spoke of military discipline and overwhelming force. The Council had worried about humanity's militarization when they had a few dozen warships. Now they had hundreds, perhaps thousands. All built in secret during the years when the Council thought it was containing human expansion. They were preparing, Talman's aide said quietly, studying the tactical displays. All this time, they knew the banishment was coming and they were preparing. Or they were preparing for something worse, Talman replied. War, invasion, Council intervention. Humanity does not do anything halfway. When they commit to a course of action, they commit absolutely. The communication came from a defense station orbiting Earth. High Arbiter Talmon. You are cleared to approach Earth. Ambassador Webb will receive you at the Geneva facility. Please follow the designated approach vector and do not deviate. Our automated defense systems are extremely sensitive. The warning was polite but clear. Humanity had turned its home system into a fortress, and any aggressive action would be met with overwhelming force. Talman's shuttle landed at the Geneva complex, a sprawling facility built into the mountains overlooking what had once been a major human city. He was met by Ambassador Marcus Webb, who looked exactly as he had 3 months ago, calm, composed, with that slight smile that suggested he knew something everyone else was still figuring out. High Arbiter, Marcus greeted him formally. Welcome to Earth. Thank you for making the journey. Ambassador Webb, Talman replied. Or is it Ambassador still? I was uncertain whether humanity would maintain diplomatic titles after the banishment. Titles are just words, Marcus said. What matters is what we do with them. Please come inside. We have much to discuss. The Geneva facility's interior was designed to accommodate various alien physiologies, but Marcus led Talman to a simple conference room with a view of the mountains. It was deliberately understated, lacking the grandeur of the council chambers. 2 chairs, a table, a holographic display. Nothing more. You've been busy, Talman observed, gesturing toward the window where orbital platforms were visible as points of light against the daylight sky. We've been focused, Marcus corrected. For 200 years, the Council told us we were expanding too quickly, building too aggressively, innovating too recklessly. We accepted those limitations while operating in your space. Now that we're home, we're building the way we should have been building all along. No committees to slow us down, no regulations to limit our growth. Just humanity doing what we do best, adapting and expanding. Talman settled into a chair designed for his physiology, his sensory stalks curling thoughtfully. You planned this. The banishment, the withdrawal, the humanitarian interventions. All of it was orchestrated. We prepared for multiple scenarios, Marcus acknowledged. Banishment was always a possibility. Your regulations were designed for species that expand slowly, think carefully, and prioritize stability over innovation. Humanity doesn't fit that model. We knew eventually the Council would have to choose between accepting us as we are or trying to constrain us. You chose constraint. We chose to demonstrate what you would lose. By letting colonies suffer, Talman said, his voice carrying an edge. By withdrawing support systems and watching the galaxy struggle. How many died because of your demonstration? Marcus's expression hardened. How many died because of your stagnation? 4 species went extinct under the Council's watch in the last 2 centuries alone. Countless individuals died from curable diseases, preventable accidents, pirate raids that adequate security could have stopped. The Council has maintained stability by accepting a certain level of suffering as inevitable. We showed you that suffering is only inevitable if you accept it. By refusing to accept Council authority, Talman countered. By operating outside the established order. Do you understand what you're asking? For the Council to admit that thousands of years of carefully built governance were wrong? That a species barely 2 centuries old knows better than civilizations that have existed for millennia? Not wrong, Marcus said carefully. Incomplete. The Council was built to prevent conflict, maintain peace, ensure stability. It succeeded at those goals. But it succeeded by making everything slow down. Innovation became dangerous. Expansion became threatening. Risk-taking became forbidden. You created a stable galaxy by making sure nothing ever changed too quickly. That works until you face a crisis that requires rapid response. Then the very structure that provided stability becomes paralysis. Talman was quiet for a long moment, his sensory stalks waving in patterns that indicated deep thought. You speak of our system as if it failed. But we maintained peace for 3,000 years. How many species would have destroyed each other without our mediation? Many, Marcus agreed. And that's not nothing. The Council provided something valuable, a framework for coexistence, rules for interaction, mechanisms for resolving disputes. We're not saying the Council should be destroyed. We're saying it needs to evolve. The galaxy has changed since the Council was founded. Communication is faster. Technology is more advanced. Threats move more quickly. The Council's response time hasn't kept pace. And humanity's solution is to bypass the Council entirely? To respond to crises unilaterally? Our solution is to do what needs to be done, with or without permission. We're not asking the Council to approve our actions. We're demonstrating that there's another way to operate. When colonies send us distress calls, we respond immediately. When species ask for help, we provide it without committee debates. When we see problems, we solve them using whatever tools are necessary, including the AI and rapid development techniques you find so threatening. Talman leaned forward, his massive form radiating intensity. And what do you want in return? Humanity withdrew completely, built this fortress, demonstrated your capabilities. What is your demand? Readmission to the Council? Changes to our regulations? Authority to operate as you please? Marcus smiled, and it was that same enigmatic expression that had troubled Talman 3 months ago. We don't want anything from the Council, High Arbiter. That's what you don't understand. We're not asking for readmission. We're not negotiating for special privileges. We're offering an alternative. What alternative? Humanity will remain in Sol System as the Council decreed. We will not seek membership in the Council. We will not operate in Council space without explicit invitation. But we will respond to requests for assistance from any species that asks. Medical support, industrial development, security operations, humanitarian rescue. Any species that wants humanity's help can request it directly. They don't need Council approval. They don't need to go through your committees. They just ask and we respond. Talman's stalks curled tightly, a gesture of alarm. You're proposing to operate as an independent power, to allow species to bypass Council authority entirely. We're proposing to give species a choice, Marcus corrected. They can continue working through the Council systems, following your regulations, accepting your response times, or they can ask humanity for help and receive it immediately. No conflict, no competition, just options. The Council maintains its authority over species that choose to work within your framework. We serve species that need faster, more aggressive solutions. This would fracture the galaxy's unity, Talman protested. Create competing power structures. Undermine the entire system we've built. Or it would create balance, Marcus countered. The Council provides stability and order. Humanity provides innovation and rapid response. Different species can choose which approach serves their needs best. Some will prefer your careful deliberation. Others will prefer our aggressive action. The galaxy is large enough for both approaches. And when our approaches conflict, when humanity's actions contradict Council policy, then we'll disagree, just like any two sovereign powers. We'll negotiate, compromise where possible, agree to differ where necessary. But we won't submit to Council authority, and you can't force us to. You saw our defenses on your way in. Sol System is now the most fortified location in the galaxy. You couldn't conquer us if you tried, and trying would cost more than you could possibly gain. Talman sat in silence, processing the implications. Marcus was right about the military situation. The Council fleet, spread across thousands of systems, could never concentrate enough force to threaten Earth without leaving the rest of the galaxy vulnerable. And even if they tried, the cost in lives and resources would be catastrophic, but more troubling was the political reality. Species were already bypassing the Council to request humanity's help. If the Council tried to forbid such contact, they would be seen as preventing species from seeking assistance in emergencies. Their authority would erode not through force but through irrelevance. "You've created an impossible situation," Talman said finally. "The Council cannot accept an independent human power operating outside our authority, but we cannot prevent it without appearing cruel and ineffective. You've positioned us to either accept your presence or watch our legitimacy crumble." "We've positioned you to make a choice," Marcus replied. "Continue as you have, insisting on total authority even as species die waiting for your help. Or acknowledge that the galaxy has room for different approaches, that humanity can serve a role the Council cannot fill, and that cooperation might serve everyone better than conflict." Cooperation with a species that refuses Council authority? Cooperation with a species that complements Council strengths. You provide stability, order, careful governance. We provide innovation, speed, aggressive problem-solving. Together, we might create a galaxy that's both stable and adaptive. Apart, we'll compete for influence and both sides will suffer. Talman rose from his chair, his massive form towering over Marcus. "You ask for everything while offering nothing. You want the freedom to operate independently while expecting the Council to accept your interference in galactic affairs. This is not negotiation, Ambassador. This is ultimatum." Marcus stood as well, meeting Talman's eyes without flinching. "Then I'll be clear about the ultimatum. Humanity is not returning to Council authority under any circumstances. We will continue responding to asylum requests and assistance calls from any species. The Council can either work with us, creating frameworks for cooperation where our interests align, or you can oppose us, spend resources trying to limit our influence, and watch species increasingly bypass your authority to work with us directly. Those are your options. Choose wisely." The two representatives stood facing each other, representatives of fundamentally different approaches to galactic civilization. One built on careful consensus and controlled development. The other built on aggressive innovation and rapid response. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had followed one path. Now humanity was offering another. Talman turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The Council will convene to discuss this. But understand, Ambassador, that what you propose could end in conflict. If species begin seeing humanity as an alternative to Council authority, if our legitimacy erodes, some members will prefer war to irrelevance." "Then they'll lose," Marcus said simply. "Not because humanity wants war, but because we've prepared for it. We spent 2 centuries accepting your limitations while building quietly. Now those limits are gone? Do you really want to discover what humanity can accomplish when we're not holding back?" Talman left without responding, his mind churning with the impossible choice Marcus had presented. Return to the Council and recommend acceptance of humanity's independence, undermining 3,000 years of unified governance. Or recommend opposition, potentially starting a war the Council couldn't win and didn't need, back on Earth. Marcus watched Talman's shuttle depart, climbing toward orbit where it would jump back to Council space. Amelia Cross joined him at the window. "Think he'll convince them?" she asked. "Eventually," Marcus replied. "Not immediately. There will be debates, arguments, probably threats. Some species will oppose us purely on principle. Others will quietly start requesting our help regardless of Council policy. Gradually, the reality will become undeniable. The galaxy needs what we provide. The Council will adapt to that reality or they'll become irrelevant. And if they choose war?" Marcus smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Then we'll remind them why we built all these ships. But it won't come to that. Talman is wise enough to see the truth. The galaxy has changed. The Council's era of absolute authority is ending. Not with violence, not with revolution, but with simple evolution. Humanity represents the next phase of galactic civilization. They can join that evolution or become history. Most species, given that choice, choose survival. Far across the galaxy in the council chambers, Talman addressed thousands of delegates. He spoke of his journey to Sol System, his conversation with Ambassador Webb, the impossible choice humanity had presented. As he spoke, he watched the reactions ripple through the crowd. Anger, fear, defiance, but also recognition. Many delegates had been receiving reports from their homeworlds. Reports of human assistance, rapid response, problems solved that the Council had been too slow to address. Humanity has shown us a mirror, Talman concluded. They have revealed what we have become. A civilization so focused on stability that we cannot adapt, so committed to process that we forget purpose, so concerned with authority that we ignore results. We can condemn them for refusing our control, or we can learn from them that there are different ways to serve the galaxy's needs. You suggest surrender? Counselor Dravix demanded. Accepting human independence means admitting we were wrong. No, Talman replied quietly. It means admitting we were incomplete. The Council has kept the peace for 3,000 years. That is no small achievement. But keeping peace and solving problems are different skills. Humanity has skills we lack. Perhaps it's time we stopped seeing that as a threat and started seeing it as an opportunity. The debate raged for weeks. But gradually the impossible became inevitable. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had shown species what rapid, aggressive problem-solving looked like, and they liked it. The Council could adapt or become obsolete. 3 months after Talman's visit to Earth, the Council passed the Coexistence Accord. Humanity would remain independent, operating from Sol System. The Council would maintain authority over member species who chose to remain under its governance. Species facing crises could request assistance from humanity without Council approval. Frameworks would be established for coordination where interests aligned. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't victory. It was adaptation, the galaxy learning that unity didn't require uniformity. On Earth, Marcus Webb received the news and allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Humanity had been banished softly, but their absence had shaken the galaxy loudly enough to change it forever. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps that was exactly what it needed.